All right, good morning. Mr. Ward, you mind opening us up with a word of prayer?
Father God, thank you for this time that we have together. I pray now that it is edifying to us and that it's instructing to us. And I pray that you be with Mike as he teaches, that you keep him on the straight and narrow of your word in Christ's name.
All right, Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to start and read in verse 36 and read to the end of the chapter, and then my plan is we'll walk through the text real quick so that I can try to get through the chapter today, and then we'll talk about some historical things and how God used it to develop things over redemptive history. This was the dream. Now we will tell its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the strength, and the glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand, and has caused you to rule over them. And you are the head of gold. After you will rise another kingdom inferior to you, and another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. And then there will be a fourth kingdom, as strong as iron, and insomuch as iron crushes and shatters all things, so like iron that breaks into pieces, it will crush and break all these into pieces. And then that you saw the feet and toes, well, they were partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, insomuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. And as the toes and the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong, and other parts of it will be brittle. In that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another, and with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but as itself shall endure forever. And insomuch as you have saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, that it will crush the iron and the bronze and the clay and the silver and the gold. And the great God, this great God, has made known to you, king, what will take place in the future. So the dream is true, and its interpretation trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, and he paid homage to Daniel, and he gave orders to present him an offering and the fragrant and of incense. And the king answered Daniel and said, Surely your God is now the God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries, since you have been able to reveal the mystery. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the province of Babylon, and the chief priest, and all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel made a request to the king, and that he would appoint Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the administrations of the province of Babylon, while Daniel was in the king's court. So last week we begin to see that Daniel was going to he basically won the approach of or the heart of King Nebuchadnezzar by telling him the dream. And he looked over at Arioch, and remember what he said to Arioch? He said, Look, Arioch, we're not going to have to whack this guy. Now, I thought I was going to have to kill this guy any minute, because he was not going to be able to tell me the dream. Now he has told me the dream. So then he knew at that point he had won over the heart, per se, of Nebuchadnezzar, that Nebuchadnezzar was now going to listen to him as he gave the interpretation. Now, the first one was the head of gold, and he looked at Nebuchadnezzar and said, You're the man. And I can imagine Nebuchadnezzar going, Look at me. I am the man. And then he goes on and he talks about the Medo-Persian Empire that will rise. He doesn't say Medo-Persian, but he says, there will be one that will come up after you. It'll be inferior to you. And I think that is what he heard. Hey, there's going to be someone that's going to come after you, but he won't be as good as you. And then he talks about a third kingdom. Hey, I asked last week, did anybody have any headings in their Bible that as a description of the kingdoms? I just want you to know that even in the New American Standard, where it has the descriptions, they don't even tell you the third kingdom. That's how sometimes confusing Bible interpreters still are at odds with one another of who these kingdoms are. It's like after all of these years and all the commentaries, at least some of them would be settled. This one goes from the Medo-Persian to Rome. So you have a third kingdom that will be bronze, and it will rule over the whole earth. And then it says in verse 40, there will be a fourth kingdom. It will be strong as iron, insomuch as it crushes and shatters all things. So he says, hey, there's going to be a fourth kingdom that's going to come, and it's going to be strong. It's going to be stronger than the others. And remember, as we're going through this, why don't we just go ahead and do this now? We got some fancy pens. So bigger. Hold it like this. Can y'all see that? That's awesome. What was the second one?
Medo-Persian.
I'm going to come over here. We're going to have to do some... So Babylon was gold, right? Right? Yay?
Yep.
What was this?
Silver.
What was this one? Just having y'all say it, so make sure y'all paying attention, not falling back asleep. Guess I should probably slide over a little bit. So, he says Nebuchadnezzar is the man. He is the head. Why did he say he was the head of all things? You remember, why was he going to be supreme in his kingdom? Anybody remember? Unchecked, unfettered monarchy. Hey, under the Babylonian Empire, the kings were absolutely unchecked by anyone or anybody. Whatever he said, absolute truth. Remember, I said you didn't get fired in the Babylonian Empire. You got killed. If you were a soothsayer, a diviner, and you didn't do what he wanted you to do, what did he say he would do to you? He would chop you up in pieces and make your house as a pile of dung. You did not get fired. You got killed. Under the Medo-Persian Empire, you would come along, and that king would be great, but he would be bound by the laws of the Medes and the Persians. So he could say something, but he could not be able to overturn it once he said it, because there was, and this is an easier way to understand it, it was somewhat of a constitutional law that bound the king. Well, then you come along to the Greeks. I think this is kind of where we left out the other day. You come along to the Greeks, and as strong as they were, and as vast as the empire was, it was unstable as water. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then when you get to Rome, hard as a rock. Why do we say, not only because of here, but anybody understand why they say that was the iron heel of Rome? Because Rome, go ahead.
So they used iron.
Well, now they use, well, certainly, but when, hey, you had an insurrection that came up, what did Rome go in there and do? They stomped it out with their foot. They didn't go in there and try to make peace. The only ones that I can remember in history that they tried to make peace with were the Jews. Everybody else, they went out there and they crushed them. Look, Rome would march across lands, crush it, burn it to the ground, and then go, look at the peace of Rome. That's not peace. That's absolute destruction. And that's what they did. Now, we'll talk about how they had great time of peace and all that when we get there in a minute. So, these are the kingdoms. But when you get to the one with Rome, you have one that comes after that, which is a stone that's cut without hands. and it's going to come from a mountain, it's going to be a little itty bitty stone, and what it does is it comes and it hits this huge colossus made of these four things like a bowling ball and just shatters it. So, as he gives Nebuchadnezzar this interpretation, Nebuchadnezzar he still ain't got it. He still hasn't got it. That everything that is coming from you and everything afterwards is going to be shattered with a stone that's not cut without, it's cut without hands and comes from somewhere. Look, every one of these was built by what? Human beings. Yeah, now don't get me wrong, it's God that raised those people up and he dropped, but from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, look, these kingdoms are raised up by men, and we'll even see that in chapter 4. What does Nebuchadnezzar do walking on the top of his palace? He doesn't say, look what God's given me. What does he say? He said, look at me. Once again, he's the man. So, it gets to where it says that in verse 45, insomuch as you saw that stone which was cut without hands, coming from that mountain, it crushed the iron, the clay, the silver, the gold, and the great God made known to the king what will take future. He's saying, look, God just revealed to you what was going to take place in the future. In the future. Everything that would take place up until the coming of Messiah's kingdom, he made known in this one dream to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, he didn't make it known explicitly. Now, some 60 years later in chapter 7, Daniel's going to have a vision or a dream, and that dream is going to basically give him an exposition of each one of these. That's why there are commentators and preachers that say you should not use chapter 7 to interpret chapter 2, and I'm saying you're absolutely wrong because they are connected. Now, one was given to a pagan king, one was given to a godly man with better information. But understand, at this point, God is dealing directly with Nebuchadnezzar. And as he's dealing directly with Nebuchadnezzar, this does not cause Nebuchadnezzar to understand his inferiority to God. So it says right here that he said that the great God had made known to the king what will take place in the future. So the dream was true and its interpretation trustworthy. In verse 46, then Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, and Daniel reached over and he dimmed the lights. He had the musicians start playing softly, and Nebuchadnezzar came forward, he signed the card, and he prayed the prayer. No! Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man in the planet at that time, fell on his face before an exiled Jew. Does that not seem odd to y'all? He bowed down and worshiped Daniel. He should have bowed down and worshiped God. What did he tell him? It's God that raises up kings and kingdoms, not Daniel. He says, look, there's nothing in me. God just gave me this information. All I'm doing is relaying it to you. And there's no doubt in my mind at this point that Daniel was going, man, this is weird. This is weird. He says, present him with offerings and a fragrant of incense. Now, it doesn't say here that Daniel accepted those things as an offering or a sacrifice to those pagan gods. It doesn't say. We don't know. I can certainly say this. Daniel probably was pretty uncomfortable at this point. Here it is, some 18-year-old young man and this most powerful man on all the planets bowing down on his face before him. He says, the king answered Daniel, said, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, and he is a revealer of mysteries. Is that true? Is that true? Yes. But that doesn't mean Nebuchadnezzar was converted at this moment. He's just saying, hey, your God's the God of gods. Your God was able to do what Marduk and Nebo and all these other Babylonian pagan gods could not do. And what was that? Reveal mysteries. It says, then the king promoted Daniel. He gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So here it is. At this point, Daniel, like I said, being probably 18 years old, probably becomes second, maybe third in command in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon for some 43 years. This is how close Daniel was to Nebuchadnezzar the years of his life. And this will play into who took over. I know it's somewhat conjecture when we get to chapter 4 when he loses his mind, but who runs the kingdom, you wonder? When he, for 7 times and times and times and times and times and times, loses his mind and he's eating grass and he's growing crazy toenails and all. It most likely Daniel. And it's because I believe that at this point, like I said, I think it was last week, that Daniel began to have a love for Nebuchadnezzar. Why? Because one, he knew that God had revealed stuff to Nebuchadnezzar that now he was going to be held accountable. Look, the more information you know about God, the more accountable you are. That's why I said last week, this is strike 1 for Nebuchadnezzar. Next chapter will be strike 2. Chapter 4, lights out. Lights out. So he made him chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So that also makes Daniel the president of the enchanters, the wise men, all that whole people that he was going to have killed. That makes him basically the president of that group. And then Daniel makes a request to the king. Hey, would you do me a favor? Would you take Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and make them over the administrators over the province of Babylon? He did not forget the very ones that helped him pray to God that he would have compassion on his people. He said, hey, it wasn't me. These guys too prayed, and the God that reveals these mysteries have now given it to me. And Daniel did not forget his friends. And understand, hey, here, remember this. We'll back up when we get there next week because of the image. They're administrators over the land. They're basically doing the king's bidding, orchestrating his policies in the land. And that plays huge into what's going to happen next week when they bow down to the golden image of which I believe is Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so now we're going to see these are instrumental in redemptive history. Not just because God said so. Okay, here. But you had Nebuchadnezzar, first king. What actually his dad was, but it says at this point he is saying he's the head of this empire. After them you had some Bibles say evil. Marduk. Anybody remember who this guy was in Babylon? I didn't think so, just checking. Maybe this will help. Oh. Anybody remember who Jehoiachin was? Who was he?
Wasn't he the king of Judah
That got taken off into
Yeah.
captivity by who? 597. It's this guy here that lets him go. You know who this guy's a descendant of? He's in Jesus' genealogy. He's a Judean or a Judah king. And it's this man that after, I think it was 39 years, you'd have to go back and look. It's in, I think it's in Jeremiah. He lets him go. He sits at the king's table. He's getting choice meats and basically an allowance until he's dead.
Is he the one who's got his eyes?
No, that's Zedekiah.
Okay.
He does that too, but he does that in 586. Okay, so evil Marduk or Amel Marduk is the one that releases him. But then you have, if I remember correctly, you have Negrasar. Yeah. Then you have Nabonidus. Man, these are cool. You can actually see better. Anybody remember this guy? Belshazzar. Who was Belshazzar? I knew everybody knew.
He's partying.
Handwriting on the wall. handwriting on the wall. So, look at these. These are taken. What did God use Nebuchadnezzar for?
Punish the Jews.
Punish them for breaking the covenant. It's exactly what Jeremiah says in chapter 25 and 27. My servant Nebuchadnezzar is going to do to you what I told him to do because you broke my covenant. He chastened the people of God. Then, after God using him, he dies. Another man comes up, shows compassion to the Davidic line, which saved him from dying in captivity. And then, as this man goes off and his line continues on, another guy comes up, tries to do a coup. Nabonidus then is raised up after he dies, which is Belshazzar's dad. If you go back and you read how long they're going to be in captivity, it says he will be there for as long as Nebuchadnezzar, his son, and his grandson. That's Nebuchadnezzar's son. That's his grandson. That's how long the captivity would last. And how do we know that this is how long the Babylonian Empire lasted? Because right here. Cyrus the Great comes along while he's having his feast with the implements that were taken from the temple. He gets handwriting on the wall, Mene Tiki, Farsal, Nekam, whatever it is. Says something crazy. And he says, what is that? And he comes in, nobody else can say it, but he knows there's somebody out there that can't answer that. Who was that person? It was Daniel. Daniel comes in, he goes, oh yeah, your kingdom's over. He said, keep your gifts because your kingdom's not worth anything. And it's when Cyrus the Great comes in, who I believe is Darius the Mede. Same person, both of them are spoken of in Daniel when we get there. He comes along and the captivity is over. What does Cyrus the Great do? Now, this is the redemptive history unfolding through these four empires.
He makes that proclamation that they can all go back.
He sure does, and that happens 539 or 538. There is some debate on how that took place. But, so, now we're going to see how this unfolds through the Persian Empire. You have Cyrus the Great, then you have another man that comes along named Cambyses. Cambyses, that's A-E-S. Cambyses. He comes along, he continues somewhat of the work of Cyrus, okay? Then you have Darius the First. Then you have Xerxes. Xerxes. There's the third. Now, he makes a proclamation to go back. You remember what happens once they get back? What do they not do? What do they not do when they go back? They don't do what God told them to do. You're supposed to go back. You're supposed to lay the foundations of the temple. Remember, Cyrus has prophesied some 150 years before this that by Isaiah that I'm going to raise up my anointed one, Cyrus. He's going to send you back into the land. He's going to send you back to Jerusalem. And when you go back, you're supposed to lay the foundation of the temple. You're supposed to build the place of God, the dwelling place of God. And you're supposed to build the city and the wall around it. He sends them back to lay the foundations of the house of God. They don't do what they're supposed to do. So you have the prophets Haggai and Zechariah that come along and rebuke them for not doing so. And then they start continuing that. But in the meantime, you have some guys that come along that try to hinder that. Namely, probably people we would know be Sanballat and Tobias and all. They go try to hinder that. Well, that comes to where they talk to these two guys here, and he says, wait a minute, I'm going to have this guy here made a decree for them to build it. You're going to continue doing what this guy said do. And why? Because nobody can trump the law of what? The Medes and the Persians. Am I making sense? Okay? It's too much information, too much history. It's important because it's right here. It's in God's Word. This is how things unfolded in history. And Daniel is claimed to have been written some 200 years after these events had taken place. And Daniel's prophesying it almost 500 years before it took place. Some of it when we get to the end down here. They run into some hiccups here too. Okay? Artaxerxes gives them another decree. 445? 444? Am I correct? Somewhere around there? Actually, that should be this way. We're going down. To go back and do it. Okay? So go back, they get in the land, they're doing their thing, through Nehemiah and Ezra and all of that. That's when this takes place, right around here. Okay? Ezra, Nehemiah. Yes?
Just a quick historical question. Thermopylae is under Xerxes, right? Is that right?
Yep, this would be 480.
Okay,
Yep, 480.
that's the
This is, Thermopylae. When he goes to try to invade Greece, remember 300, the movie?
Yeah.
That's what it is. The Spartans, okay? That's when this takes place. He failed. This is what some scholars, in my opinion, my studies, I believe that was the party that Esther was having, okay? When he was fixing to invade Greece. That's what the party he was having, and it failed miserably, okay? That's when this kingdom starts to go downward. His campaigns to go into all of his wars to increase his empire, he had taxed the people to death to his campaign. So then you have another part, his son comes along, he's having to struggle with this. At this time, because of the failed thing at it was failed at Thermopylae, and then he tries to invade Greece with of Macedon. That is Alexander the Great's daddy. Okay? Failed miserably. He at some point tries to do it again. He sets up through some shady stuff, I should say, cross the river, and in a meeting, he had Philip of Macedon assassinated. Now you see where we're coming to.
Are you talking about the son of Xerxes or Xerxes himself?
No, we're down here. We're down here, Darius the Third. Okay?
I just have a question. So, like, where would, because in Esther, the end of Esther, we're talking about, the end of Esther describes whoever Xerxes that was as basically having rule over the whole world in a sense. So
And he did, but his kingdom was beginning to fall because of the taxations on the people, their unwillingness to continue going out. Dude, when you're running out of money to pay your fighters, what do? They quit fighting. They quit fighting. And what'd you say?
I said, print more money.
Yeah. Hey, and I would even say part of that was Alexander the Great. Maybe that might have been part of the downfall when they get to the Indus River and they're wanting to go into India. I think part of that was that his guys were so war-torn. And we'll get there in just a second. Just let me, So, yes, he did have a vast empire. Okay. Yes, huge. And he was going out and he was trying to conquer. But the Battle of Thermopylae was a groin shot to him. I mean, it really wasn't. Ugh. And they go, oh, he's not as bad as he thinks he is. Got to remember, Greek's on the rise at that point. Greece is on the rise. So, Darius has Philip Macedon.
Just off the wall question.
off the wall, so I shall right over here.
Yeah, right there. Because you mentioned India. Did Babylon conquer India and the Medes and Persians conquer India?
India? No. No.
Yeah.
They did not cross the Indus River.
Yeah, okay.
At least not that I know of. Am I correct on that? I didn't think so. Say, not yet. Now, I think at Rome reaches that direction, like they go to there, they go actually to Britain and Germania and all of that, but that doesn't happen till after Messiah's kingdom comes. Okay? So, that leads us to here, and I'm going to tell you that we are not going to finish. Philip the Macedon was killed in 336. His son Alexander is in his place. He becomes king. I think I said last week he has an issue. Some people don't want him to be king. He's very young. He goes back to Thebes where he's having a problem. He kills 6,000. He basically kills the city. He leaves one house up. That was his favorite poet. He left it up. He leaves. He goes back. He takes the throne. And that becomes the superpower, world superpower, because it's at this point, and if I could, Darius III's pretty much wiped out. Done. Medo-Persian's over. Now, this doesn't last long. Remember, he conquers the known world from the Indus River to I wish I had a world map, to Macedonia, okay? Almost to where you go into Europe, per se, okay? For the line of Europe. He conquers that whole land in 12 years. 12 years. Do you understand? It took, 219 years for this kingdom to do that. Alexander the Great does it in 12 years. Now he gets to the Indus River. The claim is there's just no more land for him to conquer. That I don't think is the very accurate statement, in the sense that there was plenty of lands to conquer. His men were so worn, torn, he just couldn't go any further. I mean, these guys for 12 years went through there and butcher and lay waste to anybody that come in their way. Hey, when they took over, you talk about fury, hatred, and love to kill people, this is it. This is it. Hey, because of what happened at Thermopylae, it was inbred into the Greeks at that point. We are going to remove them from history because of what they did. Now, under the providence of God, okay, this is how things have come about. Alexander the Great comes along. He's not here long, okay? But when he dies, it splinters into his four generals. Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Cassander, and Lysimachus. His four generals, he dies, there's no heir to his throne. He did have a son that probably could have taken the throne. He was murdered by one of his generals, so he couldn't take it. There was a power struggle for who was going to take up. Ptolemy takes Egypt. Seleucus takes basically Babylon area. Cassander takes Greece. Lysimachus gets Asia Minor, which would be modern day Turkey. And I don't know if you can see this, Thrace, which would be modern day Bulgaria. Okay? Question? Or are you just breathing hard on me?
No.
Lots of information?
I'm saying
Sorry.
it to myself without loud, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Okay.
My Now Seleucus would also get Syria, right?
Yeah, I was going to bring. Yes. Yep. Yes. Go ahead.
Babylon is modern day Iraq.
It is in modern day Iraq.
Was the seat of Persia modern day Iran? Is that where they were at when the Medes and Persians were in power, like their center?
Yes, they're Persians. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So, I would say, I could be wrong, but my understanding is he actually in the beginning got Syria. I didn't want to get into all the details because I don't have time to get into 300 years of, I wish I did. So, these two end up fighting all the time. Okay? These two become basically the strong. Ptolemy and Seleucus, huge. This is very, 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 very important and how we're going to understand when we get to Daniel 10, 11, and 12. Because this becomes the king of the south. This is the king of the north. When it starts going, and the king of the south comes down to the king of the north, and he sends someone and marries her, and she marries him, and then she kills him, and all that is what's going to take place. So, they're fighting. He did have Syria. They're fighting. Seleucus takes that land. So not only does he take Babylon, he takes Syria and Mesopotamia. So now, this guy's rising. Seleucus. Okay? These guys actually become kind of insignificant in redemptive history. But these two become very important. Ptolemy. Anybody know who Ptolemy the Second did? How do you think we got the Septuagint? Ptolemy the Second commissioned in the 3rd century to have the Bible, the Old Testament, translated into Greek language. Well, why would he have it done in the Greek language? Because his predecessor, wherever he went, he got tired of not being able to talk to people. And what did he do? He said, we're going to make a unified language where wherever I go, I ask somebody a question, they're going to answer me in my language. And if they don't, Alexander the Great had the Koine Greek language, and it went all over his empire. You know how huge that is? That's huge. What do you think they spoke at the time of Christ? What do you think when they were translated the New Testament in? It was written in Koine Greek. That's huge. That's how God used these men in history. Alexander, pagan king, you better believe it. Did God use him? Yes. Vast empire. Created the Koine Greek language so that this man here one day would say, I'm going to have that Old Testament Hebrew scriptures translated into the Greek language so that everybody in the empire can be able to read it. And then this guy in the Seleucus Empire, oh man, they become a thorn in their flesh for years. For years. This guy here Seleucus would have children. He would have Antiochus the first, the second, the third, and the person that we will wind up seeing the most of is Antiochus the fourth. And he is an absolute tyrant. I will prove to you from Scripture, this is prototypical of the Antichrist. Prototypical. We don't use that word Antichrist in the Old Testament. What they use is the little horn. And if you follow redemptive history, it picks up in not only in the little horn raises up in the Greek Empire, the little horn trajectory will pick up, and we don't have time to get to Rome today. Will pick itself up in Rome. And then as you get into the Roman Empire, you see that little, that horn that raises itself up and speaks pompous words against the people of God, just like Antiochus would point to a later day when there would be one horn that would raise himself up at the end of the age who would be the beast. You understand? This is how all of this plays out in redemptive history. And God revealed these nations rising and falling to who? To Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar. He gave him a dream. Who interpreted the dream to Nebuchadnezzar? Daniel did. Now, might go to Rome for 2 minutes. It says that Rome was hard as iron, right? We know that. But it said he had some feet and toe problems, right? Okay, had toe jam. They didn't come together good. But the Roman Empire itself, and I know there might be some people who disagree with me, did not begin with Julius. It did not. He was part of the triumvirate. The triumvirate was three men that ruled. Although they did rule in a dictator type way, he never rose to the name emperor. The emperorship didn't come in until 27 BC with Octavian. Actually, and we probably better known him as Augustus. What did Caesar Augustus do?
Made a decree.
He sure did. He made a decree which got Jesus' mom where?
Bethlehem.
Yeah, back in Bethlehem. So here it is. We got another pagan king that comes along, and he ends up being in power to make a decree to get Jesus' family back in Bethlehem. Now, this is when the Roman emperorship would begin. Everyone after him would be an emperor. Okay, everyone after there. It would be Caesar, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, and then you had, what's cool about here, you really have some three nobodies that come along. Nero kills himself in 68. The empire goes into absolute turmoil. There's infighting everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean we're talking Romans fighting Romans, people power struggle. You have a guy that comes up by the name of Galba. He's 3 months maybe? Otho, he's not long either. Then you have Vitellius. He comes up. But when Nero died, they wanted this man to be Vespasian. Everybody know who Vespasian is? He is the one, yeah. He is the one that sent Titus, his son, during the Jewish wars and said, go first, try to make peace with the Jews. Don't go in there and desecrate their holy place. Just try to make peace. Well, they failed to do so. And it was Vespasian that said, okay, Titus was his son. He becomes general. He says, all right, wipe it out. And it was under his order by his son that it was said that once Jerusalem fell, that they ran out of crosses to crucify the insurrectionist. They said there was some 30,000 crucified in one day. Now, people argue that amount. But they said as far as you could go down the road, they were running out of wood to crucify people, so they would hold them until those people died so that they could use the wood. It was under this rule. Now, they said it has some feet and toe problems. Remember? Feet and toe problems. What happens is with Augustus, he then tries to, the Herods, the Hasmonean dynasty, all of that, and the Hasmonean dynasty came about with a revolt, and we'll get to it in chapter 7, with a revolt. They tried to mix the two of the Romans and the Jews together. That's how the Herods come about. Anybody know that the Herods were not heir to be kings over the Jews? They were Edomites. They were cut out of the covenant. But the Rome puts them in power to rule over the people. So there was this constant struggle of, okay, we have this man who claims to be of Jewish, or to be a Jewish descent, and you have this emperor who are working together, and they to try to mesh two things that don't come together like iron and clay, and it's brittle and it never works, and there's constant fighting. Herod the Great killed everybody that came up against him, and if you don't think so, when Jesus was going to be born in Bethlehem, what do you think Herod the Great tried to do when he heard there was a king that was going to take his throne? He tried to kill him. And I don't have time to finish. I'm so sorry. Yes, sir.
What does Ptolemy II?
Yep.
He was a pagan king. What did he had anything to do with the Jewish like scriptures?
Well, some of them believe he was converted.
Okay.
Some believe. I don't know.
I don't know
Yeah,
nothing
I have no idea. Just like you, that would be saying King James. King James was not a believer, but he did order the Bible to be translated into the English language to keep the peace. Now, is that what Ptolemy did? I'm not sure. Some people believe he was converted. I'm not convinced of that. But God used him. Okay? God used him for that. Mr. Barry, will you close us out?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we can study your word, and thank you for the blessing of Brother Mike being able to expound it to us, and thank you for just the evidence that your word is true, and that you are the one who sets up kings, who raises them up, who puts them down, and who is writing out your story. I ask that you would bless our time of worship to come. Bless Brother Keith as he brings us the word. Help us to come with our hearts ready to worship. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me write that back up.
So Brother Mike.
Yes, sir.
So, when I was to do it, the Old Testament pretty much ends. It goes out, because the last of those minor prophets would have written that in, correct?
In Malachi, which would have
Yeah.
been 450-ish.
Right. And so,
That's what some people, I think it was actually later than that, because I think it was after Nehemiah's reforms.
okay.
I think there's a thing that talks about them going to take lives and all that again. I think that's Malachi.
And then, that whole Greek thing,
Can I erase it? We good?
that would pretty much start with, intertestamental period, a lot of it.
Yes, that is the intertestamental time, from right there, from Artaxerxes to Tiberius, maybe, Augustus.
This is a thought that I had when we were writing this all up here, and it's amazing how Cyrus sends them back, so they're not in the Medo-Persians when the Greeks totally annihilate that. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, they're already back in the land. I didn't have time to get to it, but man, there's so much
What
that
did the
takes
Greek?
place.
When the Greeks came to power, did they? That's when the whole Antiochus Epiphanes thing.
Yeah, but they were very sympathetic. When the Greeks come in first, they're very sympathetic. And I couldn't get into Alexander actually comes in and was going to ransack Jerusalem. That's cool. I should have. I just
Then
don't
the
have
priest,
time.
yeah, the priest comes out
Yeah,
and
I
said,
didn't have
I'd had a dream about this
I
guy
wanted to
coming out.
spend a week on each one of those.
I know, because I was trying to follow the whole the people of God through that. You know, that's.
But God uses each one of those to keep his people.